Who was Melchizedek? Melchizedek is one of the Bible's most intriguing characters. Shrouded in mystery, yet pivotal in understanding the priesthood, kingship, and the eternal plan of God. Mentioned briefly in Genesis, Psalms, and Hebrews, his story holds deep significance for understanding both the Old and New Testaments. Melchizedek first appears in Genesis 14:18-20, where he is described as the king of Salem and a priest of the Most High God. His name, Melchizedek, means king of righteousness, which aligns with his role as both a king and a priest. This dual role is rare in the Bible, as kings and priests usually held separate offices. Melchizedek's kingship over Salem, which is commonly identified as ancient Jerusalem, adds to the mystery, connecting him to a city central to God's plan. What is his role? Melchizedek's role as a priest is significant because he is the first person in the Bible to be called a priest. Hebrews 7:1-3 highlights this by comparing Melchizedek to Jesus, stating that Melchizedek was without father, without mother, without descent, having neither beginning of days nor end of life. This phrase emphasizes the eternal nature of his priesthood, which prefigures the priesthood of Christ. Unlike the Levitical priests, who were descendants of Aaron, Melchizedek's priesthood is described as eternal, without a genealogical record, pointing to the divine nature of his office. Why is Melchizedek important? Melchizedek's importance lies in his unique position as both a king and a priest, which foreshadows the coming of Jesus Christ. In Psalm 110:4, David prophesies that the Messiah would be a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. This prophecy is crucial because it links the Old Testament figure to the New Testament fulfillment in Christ. The writer of Hebrews expounds on this, explaining that Jesus' priesthood is superior to the Levitical priesthood because it is based on the order of Melchizedek, eternal and appointed directly by God, not by lineage. Where does Melchizedek come from? The origins of Melchizedek are intentionally left vague in the Bible. Genesis 14 presents him suddenly with no mention of his ancestry or his life after his encounter with Abraham. Hebrews 7:3 emphasizes this point, suggesting that Melchizedek's lack of genealogy is intentional, pointing to his eternal priesthood. His sudden appearance and disappearance without further biblical record contribute to the mystery surrounding him. When did Melchizedek appear? Melchizedek appears during the time of Abraham, shortly after Abraham's victory over the kings who had taken Lot captive. In Genesis 14:18-20, Melchizedek brings out bread and wine and blesses Abraham, who in turn gives him a tenth of everything, a tithe. This act of giving a tithe to Melchizedek is significant because it shows Abraham recognizing Melchizedek's superior spiritual authority. This event happens before the establishment of the Levitical priesthood, suggesting that Melchizedek's priesthood is of a higher, more ancient order. How is Melchizedek connected to Jesus? The connection between Melchizedek and Jesus is most clearly articulated in the book of Hebrews. Hebrews 7:17-28 explains that Jesus is a priest after the order of Melchizedek, meaning that his priesthood is not based on ancestry or the law, but on the power of an indestructible life. Just as Melchizedek was both a king and a priest, Jesus is our eternal king and high priest. The bread and wine that Melchizedek offers in Genesis 14 can be seen as a foreshadowing of the Last Supper, where Jesus institutes the new covenant with his disciples. What does it matter today? Understanding Melchizedek's role helps us grasp the significance of Jesus' priesthood. The Levitical priesthood, which was based on the law and lineage, was limited and temporary. In contrast, Jesus' priesthood, like Melchizedek's, is eternal and universal, available to all who believe. This means that Jesus is always interceding for us, offering us direct access to God without the need for a human mediator. Melchizedek's story also underscores the continuity of God's plan from the Old Testament to the New. The mystery of his figure, his eternal priesthood, and his connection to Christ serve as a reminder that God's plan for salvation has always been in place, with Christ as the central figure. Examples of Melchizedek's influence. Throughout the Bible, Melchizedek's influence is seen in the way he sets a precedent for the priesthood that Jesus would ultimately fulfill. Genesis 14:18-20. Abraham's encounter with Melchizedek, where he receives a blessing and gives a tithe, demonstrates the recognition of Melchizedek's authority. Psalm 110:4. David's prophecy about the Messiah's priesthood being in the order of Melchizedek links the Old Testament expectations to the New Testament reality. Hebrews 7. This chapter extensively discusses how Jesus is the fulfillment of Melchizedek's priesthood, offering a new covenant that surpasses the old. Melchizedek is a figure who appears briefly in the Bible, but whose impact is profound. As the King of righteousness and peace, he foreshadows the coming of Jesus Christ, who is our eternal King and High Priest. By understanding who Melchizedek was, what his role was, and how he connects to Jesus, we gain a deeper appreciation of God's amazing plan for humanity, a plan that transcends time and is fulfilled in Christ.